Well, one of the things I highly recommend to everyone, whether you're young, a student, older, or an adult, wherever you are, whatever your occupation, is to have a basic understanding of how you function as an individual and how the human mind and body work in general. You should establish a connection and say to yourself, oh, this is what happens to me. If you're someone who experiences back problems, you should know that during moments of stress, your back is likely to send warning signals. If you suddenly have blurred vision, skin changes, gastrointestinal issues, or neurological symptoms like eyelid tremors or numb hands, you will have a much better grasp of how your body and organism function. The first step is self-awareness. Who am I? What's my personality like? Am I shy, sensitive, impulsive, obsessive, or perfectionistic? Do I overthink things? Am I distrustful? Am I dependent on others' opinions? Am I insecure? And on a psychological level, maybe I'm someone who experiences anxiety, panic attacks, or sadness. Conduct a sort of self-diagnosis. To me, this is key. What are the factors that stress me out? What triggers my alert mode? What puts me into the sympathetic nervous system, the cortisol we've talked about? These factors can be people, things, memories, moments, circumstances. But when you understand your stress triggers, you'll know how your personality transforms under stress. For example, sensitive individuals become very vulnerable under stress. Now I'm fine, now I'm not, now I'm fine, now I'm crying, now I'm anxious, now I'm fine again. Shy people tend to become blocked under stress. Impulsive individuals become more aggressive under stress. Overthinkers become more obsessive and enter thought loops under stress. Perfectionists, when stressed, experience a sense of life dissatisfaction because nothing meets their standards. When you understand yourself, you feel relieved. So, when you ask me what can help us create this framework, I use this framework with all my patients. Who are you? What are your stress triggers, and how does this affect you? When you understand your body, when you understand your personality, it's much easier to cope. The second thing is to live as anti-inflammatory a life as possible, meaning people are inflamed as they go about their daily lives. I always say that if we had an inflammation detector, it would break because, more than ever, people are living with so much uncertainty and stress that there's a latent state of inflammation in society. I believe, and I always say this with care, even though many people will hear it, that we should be mindful of our diet without becoming obsessed. Eat with knowledge of what suits you and what doesn't. It's true that nowadays, it's been proven that many foods can cause inflammation and disrupt the body, so we should strive to eat as healthily as possible. Let unhealthy eating be the exception, not the rule. The second thing is the sleep habit. Nowadays, it's crucial. When you sleep poorly, the likelihood of everything going awry is very high because during sleep, we repair our minds, our bodies, our immune systems, our hippocampus, the memory storage area, is sorted out. It's like everything falls into place, and when you don't sleep well, and nowadays, we sleep poorly due to screens, worries, etc., this disrupts us. A couple of tips for good sleep. First, avoid heavy dinners and alcohol. These will always lead to worse sleep. Second, be cautious with screens. The light from screens emits a type of light that inhibits the proper secretion of melatonin, which is essential for good sleep. So, take care of your sleep. Sleep is going to be a fundamental issue. And then, another thing I believe can help in this world we live in is to have healthy outlets for those moments of stress. Exercise is essential. Through exercise, we break down that cortisol, almost evaporating it from the body. Be cautious with excessive exercise, as it can put you in alert mode. I'm talking about regular and healthy exercise that we all know. I also recommend educating your inner voice. Be careful, as we know that this inner voice will have an impact on my life. So, let my inner voice serve to support me, not to bring me down. Conduct a diagnosis. How do I treat myself? Third, the people you surround yourself with. Be careful because sometimes part of the problem is that you're surrounded by people who put you on alert. Fourth, humans are not designed to constantly live in the sympathetic nervous system. A little bit of it can help you be deeply efficient, profoundly effective, to approach things in the best possible way. But if you stay in that mode for too long, you run the risk of getting sick. That's why it's important to occasionally switch from alert mode, the sympathetic nervous system, to the parasympathetic mode, which includes meditation, relaxation, deep breathing, self-connection, connection with others, connection with something greater, with transcendence. Because when I can disconnect from alert mode to connect with relaxation or the parasympathetic mode, I regain my body, my mind, my abilities, and even my immune system to face the challenges that arise in everyday life. A lot of things happen in the brain. People come to consultations and ask, "Marian, this happened to me. Why? What's the reason?" And when you explain it to them, there's a sense of relief. I mean, this makes sense. I'm not going crazy. It's not that there's something wrong with my head. I'm not some weirdo. So when you explain that there are things that are, not to say common, but frequent, or that have a neuroscientific explanation, they feel much more relieved. The good thing is that nowadays, the mind and the brain are being researched more and more, and there's a quest for answers. The brain is the great unknown, but we're gradually entering, learning, and managing it, and it's fascinating. I love to stay as up to date as I can with everything that's happening, and every time something new is discovered, I think, how can I explain this to people? Because sometimes it's so hard to understand because the mind. But well, I could tell you things. For example, I think about the famous amygdala hijack, which people often ask me about. The amygdala hijack is an automatic response of the mind to something that happens, and you have an exaggerated reaction. It's like the amygdala at that moment communicates with the hippocampus, where memories are stored, and the amygdala, where emotions, anxiety, and distress are located, where we react. That communication channel has to be as healthy as possible. So if suddenly there's a memory that hasn't been properly archived, if you come across something related to that poorly archived memory in your hippocampus, the reaction in the amygdala will be very strong. So many people can say, listening to this, well, this happens to me with a person, or an animal, or a fear of flying, or with things, I suddenly get sick, or with my children. Sometimes you have amygdala hijack reactions in parenting because you get very angry at something you see in your children and react disproportionately. So, well, the first thing, as I always explain, is to be aware that this happens to you. Try to figure out how to short-circuit that explosive loop in your mind. Every day, events happen to all of us, and some affect us a lot while others have little impact. Your child may come home one day having failed all subjects, and on that same day, you may have received a raise, and you might think, well, he'll pass eventually. But if on that day, your salary was cut or you lost your job, your child failing the subjects could generate a very negative reaction towards your child. In other words, life is not what it is. There are things that are, logically, more or less realistic, but what's important is the interpretation we make of what happens to us, and all of us interpret life in one way or another depending on a series of factors. I'll divide them into three. The first is the belief system. All of us have preconceived ideas about how life should be, how we want to be treated, how we want the world to be governed. In other words, at an ethical, moral, political, personal, and economic level. I want to live in this type of house. I want my bosses to treat me this way. I want my partner to treat me in this manner. I want my children to be like this. We have expectations, personal and professional aspirations, not only for ourselves but also for our surroundings, and about how life should be managed. There are words, people, figures, and politicians that automatically generate a reaction, and that's the belief system. Even the most tolerant person has limiting beliefs. Why? Because often we want our children to be engineers, doctors. And suddenly, you have a child. I'm thinking of a patient I have, whose son told her he wanted to be a pianist. The entire family is made up of engineers, and the mother couldn't understand it. She stopped talking to him because it was a drama for her, but her son had a talent for the piano. She couldn't perceive it. She couldn't see it. Why? Because her belief system was that anything other than being an engineer was a problem, as they came from generations of engineers in the family. The whole piano thing seemed to her to be completely absurd. Often, we need to break our belief system. I believe the most important thing is to know it. What's mine?